So here we are. After 5 weeks of intense fighting that has completely rattled the global economy, we have a sudden ceasefire in the US-Iran conflict. But what does it actually mean? Is this a real shot at peace, or are we just hitting the pause button on a much, much bigger war? Let's get into it.
Just hours ago, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. A U.S. deadline was ticking down, with threats of absolutely devastating strikes against Iran. There were reports of American B-52s already in the air. The tension, you could just feel it, was unbelievable. And then, just like that, everything changed. A crazy, last-minute diplomatic push pulled everyone back from the edge, and honestly, it stunned just about everyone watching. So what on earth just happened here? Okay, let's really dive in and unpack this thing.
All right, first things first, let's look at the deal itself. What's the fundamental trade-off that stopped the bombs from falling?
Okay, so at its core, this thing is a 2-week pause, a timeout on all the fighting. In exchange for the US and Israel halting their military actions, Iran has to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That critical waterway where a huge chunk of the world's oil passes through. It's a pretty simple exchange, but the stakes? Incredibly high.
But look, a ceasefire is just a temporary fix, right? For a real, lasting peace, Iran has come to the table with a whole 10-point plan. And interestingly, President Trump himself called it a workable basis on which to negotiate. So what exactly is Tehran asking for?
And what's really fascinating here is how these demands are broken down. First up, they want a total economic reset. Every single sanction gone, all their frozen money back. Second, a huge military shift. The U.S. military completely out of the Middle East. And third, and this is a big one, a major expansion of their own power. They want formal control over the Strait of Hormuz, locked in by the UN. We're not talking about small asks here. These are massive, maximalist demands.
Yeah, and as you can probably guess, those huge demands, they create some major problems. While this ceasefire is a breakthrough, no doubt, turning this 2-week pause into a permanent peace, that's going to be a really, really tough climb.
The first, and maybe the biggest, hurdle is the Strait of Hormuz. You got to remember, before this war started, Iran did not have formal control over that waterway. Now, they're demanding it as a price for peace. Like Senator Chris Murphy said, giving Iran that kind of power would be cataclysmic for the world. For a lot of people, that's an absolute non-starter.
And it's not just the strait. Another huge point of conflict is, well, where does this ceasefire even apply? The Pakistani mediator came out and said it covered everything, including Lebanon. But Israel immediately shot that down, saying, nope, our fight against Hezbollah continues. That disagreement right there just shows you how fragile and, frankly, how narrow this whole truce really is.
And then, there's the whole nuclear issue, which is murky, to say the least. Get this. In the Farsi version of Iran's 10-point plan, they specifically ask for acceptance of enrichment. But in the English version they handed out to journalists, that phrase is just gone. It leaves this giant, unresolved question mark hanging over one of the issues that started this whole mess.
So you've got all these sticking points, right? It almost looks impossible. Which begs the question, why now? After 5 weeks of escalating war, what was the big push that got everyone to the table at the last second? Let's look at the pressures that were building on all sides.
Okay, first, let's talk about the mood back in the U.S. According to a Reuters poll, a whopping 66% of Americans, that's 2/3, believe the U.S. should get out of the war even if its goals aren't totally met. That is a powerful sign of war weariness, and any administration would have to pay close attention to a number like that.
And it wasn't just at home. The U.S. was also hitting a wall internationally. A UN Security Council resolution to try and force the straits to reopen, it failed. Even though it had 11 votes, it got vetoed by Russia and China, who said the resolution was unbalanced. This really showed the limits of trying to build a global front against Iran at the UN.
So this is a crucial point. This whole thing didn't happen in a vacuum. Third-party mediators were absolutely key. Pakistan's prime minister was the direct go-between. And in the background, you had China, Iran's biggest trade partner, reportedly putting a lot of pressure on Tehran to find a way to de-escalate.
Okay, so that brings us right back to today. The clock is already ticking on this very fragile 2-week pause. What does the road ahead even look like?
And when I say the clock is ticking, I mean it. The timeline is incredibly tight. The deal was announced Tuesday. Talks are supposed to start this Friday in Islamabad. That leaves just under 2 weeks to solve all of the massive issues we just talked about. At the end of that, there are really only 3 ways this can go. They extend the talks, they actually strike a deal, or it's right back to war.
So I guess that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? With these huge, fundamental disagreements on everything from the Strait of Hormuz to Lebanon to Iran's nuclear program, is this just a short break in a much longer fight? Or could this actually be the breakthrough that pulls the region back from the brink? The next 2 weeks are going to tell us everything.